in order to read a book, right, you need to move on to the next chapter. And suffering, in a lot of the cases, is like rereading the last chapter again and again and again. You're never going to move on, right? So don't let a fear of not knowing something cause you to respond unresourcefully to something. Go get the resources so you can help somebody, because you never know that you might need to help yourself. The hardest thing to do is to see the lesson in that experience that's causing you the suffering, okay? And that lesson is trying to reveal something about you.
Welcome everybody to another Martial Mind Power podcast. I'm Jatinder and we're here today with Sifu Lak as always. And today we're going to be taking some wisdom from the Almighty, the art of thinking without thinking. And shall we go straight into it, Lex?
Let's do it, man.
Cool.
Let's do it.
Do you want to say stop or?
You know what? I'm going to let you do it.
All right then.
I'm going to let it be a complete...
Okay.
Random one.
Crisis or crises? And that is page 410.
410, yeah?
Yeah.
All right. So without you reading it, right, what I'll do is I'll show the viewers the image on this koan. So this is crisis, as in CRISIS, or crises, that's CRY-SEES. So crisis or crises. Okay, so phonetically sounds very similar, crises or crises, right? If I want to elongate that C's. So, and what we have in this image is an image of, forgot to even describe the image of a lady who's in a chair, and she's lying down, and looks like she's been crying. Okay. She's in a kind of got a sad expression on her face, and something's going on with her, right? So let's jump into it, JT. What experience, a divine download did you feel inside you when you read this title, this koan?
Reach out. Hands up, yeah.
Flex it.
Get present. Cool. I think with this one, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm thinking or feeling that it's to do with potential situation scenarios which at first seem like to be a crisis, but actually there's like a benefit or a hidden kind of good angle to it, which we don't see straight away. That's what I think it's about.
Hidden angle, huh?
Hidden angle, something we haven't quite not polarized ourselves to, and we haven't seen something that is actually a blessing in a disguise, possibly.
Okay, all right. You're a bit unsure there, but I can say you are on the right lines, right? So crisis or crises, okay? And the idea here is really, as Buddha said, everybody suffers, and the root cause of suffering is attachment, okay? And the attachment can be to many different things, okay? It can be an attachment to a material thing, right? You're attached to your car, you're attached to your house, you're attached to, your watch or whatever it might be, you're attached to other people, right? You're attached to your partner, you're attached to your kids, you're attached to your parents, your siblings, your friends, your community, your social media followers, right? You're attached to yourself, okay? This is your attachment to your ego, attachment to your perception The we call it the avatar in the West, but actually that word is misused. Let me make a note of that, and we'll come back to that in a minute, right? What avatar really is, right? Um, and then the other thing could be, so we talked about, you're attached to material objects, you're attached to somebody else, you're attached to yourself. Okay.
Yourself.
Now the thing is Buddha said the root cause of all suffering is attachment, and if those are the things that you attach to, then the suffering can be experienced. If something happens that starts to sever or wobble those attachments, okay. So that's one way you can suffer. And when you suffer, you may experience that as a crisis. So let's say you have a car crash, you might then have a crisis that your car's, wrecked, and you love that car, you spent, it was your first car, or it was your special car, or whatever it was. And now, now you're going through a crisis because you're so attached to it, it's bothering you and causing you internal suffering and harm and so on, right? And what happens is when you start going through that suffering, it starts to cloud your vision. Okay, it starts to cloud your perception of reality, and it also starts to decentralize yourself, right? So now you start to kind of lose your core, right? Now you start to potentially go from what may be a rational center or operating from your core to now becoming irrational and potentially erratic. Okay. And that can come out in many different ways. Okay. And that suffering can be prolonged if you keep thinking about it. Okay. I read a beautiful saying that says, in order to read a book, right, you need to move on to the next chapter. And suffering, in a lot of the cases, is like rereading the last chapter again and again and again. You're never going to move on, right? So that's kind of an introduction to suffering, right? But there's a higher learning and meaning to actually what the suffering is all about. And that suffering actually, from a spiritual standpoint, is we all experience suffering to learn something that we were born to learn in this lifetime, so we can evolve and transcend that learning. Okay. Now, in order to do that, the hardest thing to do is to see the lesson in that experience that's causing you the suffering. Okay. And that lesson is trying to reveal something about you. Therefore, that would imply that the answers have always been within you. Okay. Therefore, looking outwardly is a distraction. In fact, what you need to do is look inwardly, introspection, to kind of discover the answers that you need to learn that lesson. Now, recognizing a lesson, right, is one thing. So let's just say you're attached to your ego, right? So your ego is dented or bruised or damaged in some way, shape, or form, right? And you realize, well, I'm actually suffering because my ego has been bruised. How can I heal this? How can I resolve this? And the answer to that is simple: let go of the ego. But are people willing to let go of the ego? Is the person suffering willing to let go of the ego? And what will it take to let go of the ego? So recognizing the root cause of suffering is one thing, but actually then taking positive action to heal that is a whole new thing. Okay. So crisis or crises is really talking about, when you suffer, right, you're going to experience a crisis, right? It could be a minor, could be a major crisis, right? But whatever the severity of it is, everyone goes through some kind of crisis. Crisis is, I'm using that as an alternative word for suffering, okay? But within that suffering, when you go through all the crying, right, see the answer. And that's where crises comes from, okay? And this was where I coined this koan, crisis or crises, because through the crisis you will go do a bunch of crying, and that will hopefully allow you to see the answers within. So that's really one of the key things that I wanted to what this koan is really helping people recognize within themselves whenever you suffer or whenever you have a crisis. Now, the other point that I noted earlier about avatar. Mm-hmm. Now, avatar is a Sanskrit word. Okay, we use this word avatar in the West, like to refer to a bunch of blue animated characters in the movie, right? Right.
Target market audience.
Hey.
For your target audience.
Yeah, and then avatar is also used as what we would call a personality or a perception that we want a market, a target market to perceive you as, okay? So sometimes, you can fabricate an avatar, okay? So you create this saleable personality to connect to a certain audience so you can sell them a bunch of shit, basically, right?
Good shit. Oh, good shit.
and it's say, that's the shit, or that is shit, good or bad shit, either way, right? Good clarification there, right? But the point is, you're just selling a bunch of shit, right? Good or bad. And as we know, right, there is no good or bad. So the true meaning of avatar is not this personality, a fabricated personality that you're selling and you're expressing outwardly into the public eye or wherever you might be doing it. It could even be within a certain audience of people within a tight social network, such as families and so on, or it could be a wider in a business context and so on. The true meaning of avatar is, who are you? Your true avatar, right, is you have a spirit, and how that expresses itself within this existence is your avatar. Okay. So it's what you would essentially, if I was to reword it, it's your soul's individuated expression in this lifetime. Right? That's what avatar means, right? We are all avatars. This, to say it properly, is avatar, right? Not avatar, right? But anyway, we are where we are, and it's spelled the way it is, and we'll just go with that. Okay.
Just done a quick Google search. Just there's two meanings to it. One, like you said, there's one is an icon or figure representing a particular person in a video game, internet forum, etc. And then the other one is a manifestation of a deity or released soul in body form on earth, an incarnate divine teacher or guru, as a light even.
That's exactly what I said. Yeah. And the reason I said it's you, because we are all expressions of the divine. Right. So if we refer to a deity, right, now in Bhagavad Gita and Hinduism, there's lots of, as they say, there's thousands of gods, right? But actually, these deities and gods and goddesses are representations of divine intelligence, right, of divine beings. And, if we're born out of that, then therefore we are also a part of it. Therefore, we are also avatars and deities and gods and goddesses in our own way. But, you need to recognize that first. In order to recognize, the deity within you, the god within you, the goddess within you, you need to suffer. You got to go through a crisis, and then you got to go through the crises, right, to recognize that, right? And it all rolls back into really self-realization.
So that's an interesting one, Lex, there, because you said the suffering side of it. Like from there, you can kind of deduce that we're all made up of light, right?
Yeah.
And we all got it. Every culture talks about it. I mean,
Yeah.
that's another conversation for another day. Yeah, every
Yeah.
culture talks about it, that with the divine light. It's the ego, this kind of identity that we formed while we're here,
Mm.
right? That we think we are and what we think we're not.
Yeah.
Is when that gets shattered, or if that gets tested or tempted, is what causes the suffering, isn't it? Because that entity is what goes into crisis. It's like, what is this? This is not what I know and do and believe and whatever, and now it's all gone against it. But the light source already knows. It's just that ego identity bit that gets the crisis, isn't it?
Exactly. And there's this another Sanskrit word called avidya. Now, vidya means ignorance. Now, it's not like, I'm being ignorant of someone or of something, or ignorant to somebody else. It's an innocent ignorance, an unknowing of who you are. Okay. And it's an ignorance or an unknowing of this illusory realm that we're in. Okay. And this ignorance or unknowing of this, if I was to say a fake personality, or using avatar in the modern sense, you creating a fake avatar to present to the world. Now, what happens when you do that is, and it comes back to the stack, the body, the mind, and the spirit become out of whack. Okay, when they get out of whack, they're misaligned. Then all of a sudden, those three layers need to be realigned. In order to realign them, guess what the universe does? Right?
You obstacles, and
Yeah.
it knows if you're going off track. It's like, hang on a minute,
Yeah.
we'll get back on track.
Exactly. Absolutely. And that's what crisis is all about. Crisis is a realignment process. Well, what people generally don't realize is a crisis is a realignment process. Now, I know that some people might say, I suffered a really traumatic, horrific crisis, right? How can you say that? I'm gonna encourage you and implore you to look within yourself. If you can do the work to connect to your higher self, right, your spiritual essence, and ask it why you went through the things that you went through, you'll discover the answers. And this is not, I'm not being dismissive at all. In fact, what I'm saying is, in order to find the truth, your original truth, you'll have to connect with your higher self to really find those answers. And a lot of the time, a lot of people are not just willing to put the effort in. Because it takes time. You have to give up something else to do something else, right? You've got 24 hours in a day, right? And you do what you do, but in order to do something else, you're not willing to give up what you already do. So life goes on, you're none the wiser. And because you're none the wiser, you're never going to find out. And therefore, you carry on living this life of irresponsibility, which is you're not taking ownership and responsibility for the things that are happening in your life, even though you think that, well, this happened to me. But I can also say through experience, things happen for you, not necessarily to you, right? And they happen for you for that specific reason. The crisis or crises, right, is for your realization and reconnection with your true avatar. That's what it's all about. And like I said, there's going to be people that listen to this that have had horrendous experiences in life, horrendous experiences. Now, I've seen this, I've had a personal experience of this, and I can tell you from the bottom of my heart, from my core, from the core of my spirit, that every choice, everything that happens in life, everything that we've experienced, we've chosen before we were even born, to have that experience in this life so we can ascend that lesson, okay, and transcend it in this lifetime, right? And the only way you're going to do it is is to take responsibility for that, even if you didn't have a choice in the matter. And that's the hardest thing. That is the fucking hardest point out of all of it, is when you don't feel like you've got a choice in all the trauma that's happened to you, right? Now, I'd like to kind of draw your attention to um, um, an amazing author of the largest personal development book publishing company in the world. You know who I'm talking about?
Napoleon Hill?
No, the other one, the lady.
I forgot the name. It'll come to me in a second when you say it.
She wrote the book, Heal Yourself.
Heal yourself. Yes.
You remember what I'm talking about?
I do, but I still can't remember her name.
All right. So I'm trying to remember her name as well. I'll still try to test you to see if you remember.
We'll ask Mr. Google, heal yourself. Is that Louise Hay? That one?
That's the one.
Okay.
So Hay House is her publishing company, right? It's all there. Hay, it's coming there slowly. Hay House is the largest personal development book publishing company in the world. Okay. Now, Louise Hay, she wrote this book called Heal Yourself, and it's an amazing book. This lady, when she was a young girl, she went through a horrendous amount of trauma. Okay. She was raped as a little child, as a very, very young girl, all the way up to her teenage years. And she left her home when she was 16, right? The day she could go and be independent as an adult in the US, she did that. She left her house. She was homeless. And, she went through an horrific process. Her book, Heal Yourself, talks about her journey, right? And then how she went through all that crisis. And through that crisis, she started to go through that crises part of the process. And once she realized the lesson, that's when she transcended it, right? And she turned that around and discovered the gift that she was blessed with within this lifetime. But she had to go through that suffering in order to understand that. And then she had that obligation to give it away to the world. And then she eventually set up this publishing house, started to help other people through their own process of self-help, and through this book publishing company that specializes in personal development only. And it's an amazing story. And even during that process, she built this amazing book publishing company, Hay House. It went bankrupt. She resurrected it, so she had continuous challenges, but just because you've recognized the one lesson doesn't mean there's another lesson that you still need to learn and transcend. All right. So this whole lifetime is not just one lesson, it's a whole thing. And this whole life is a journey. As I say, literally, we are in the school of life. Okay. This life that you're in and you're living right now is teaching us something far greater, right, than any education establishment can teach us. In the West, in particular, there are educational establishments in the East that can teach you this stuff, like monasteries and temples, and you can go there and sign up, commit yourself and surrender yourself as a monk and go down that path and, realize your answers under that guidance. But, if you're not meant to do it that way, then you're not meant to do it that way, right? I've often thought, especially after my spiritual insights, that I would have loved to become a monk and just remain connected in that space all the time, and then, help others through that way. But our gurus also taught us this, and one of my senior monks, who's guiding me, said, "Do you know what? Sometimes our Guru Nanak Dev Ji talked about Gristi life. He himself was a family man. He was married. He had two sons, and he had his process of enlightenment, and he traveled the world to share the insights that he received and the wisdom that he learned to help people live more consciously towards the planet and other sentient beings. And it changed everything. But he was still a family man. So you don't all, you don't all have to go and become monks and sign up at monasteries and temples and things like that. Your temples within you, right? I mean, I don't think it's a coincidence the sides of your head's called a temple, right? Right. so go within, because the answers will be in there. So hopefully that gives you some food for thought. And ultimately, it always boils down to this: all help is self-help, and you have to be willing to make that change. You see, if you do the same thing, you're going to get the same outcome. In order to get a different outcome, you need to change something. You need to do something differently. And this is where you take action from the things and the insights you get from the crises part of this koan. All right.
So Laxis, something interesting that just came to mind. So, you were talking about, we go through these challenges and suffering and all these kind of things, because a lot of people do unfortunately think that the bad shouldn't exist, that these things shouldn't happen, but they do happen, right? That's the reality of it. But if you look at it from another angle, yeah, we know that science talks about waves, light, vibration, frequency. It says that's the kind of stuff we're made up of, right?
Yeah.
Now, if you break down a wave is made out of constructive and destructive waves. So it literally goes up and then down and then up and then down. And they know in science that if you bring two constructive waves together, the frequency, it gets bigger, right? The amplitude or the wave gets bigger.
Yeah.
If you bring two destructive ones together, that gets bigger. And if you get a destructive and a constructive wave together, it neutralizes it.
That's right.
So if everything is vibration, light, frequency, it goes ups and down in oscillation.
That's right.
How can we not have ups and downs in life?
Well, one thing I'd like to say is, right, ups and downs are relative, right? So if the wave is this way, so let's say it's flowing this way, it's going up, it's going down, it's going up, it's going down, right? It looks like it's going up and down, but what if I put it sideways?
Yeah.
Where's the up and down now?
It's like a river, isn't it?
Right? It's going left and right and left and right.
Yep.
It's the same thing. What if I put it that way?
Exactly.
It's going northeast and southwest and northeast, and then I can flip it that way. I mean, this is why in the spiritual space there is no right and wrong. There literally is no right and wrong. It's just a changing shape of energy, right? And it's recognizing that. So if we can start to learn to let go of good and bad and start to appreciate things for how they are and the way they are and look for the love in it, right, we'll be able to rise above that. We'll be able to start operating from a higher state of consciousness, right? But we are taught in a binary way.
Polarized.
Yeah, we're completely polarized in the West, right? And we've got to learn to kind of stop being hung up on an on or off for a good or a bad or a light or a dark and a noise and a quietness and, that whole kind of thing.
One can't really exist without the other, can it? Like,
no, exactly.
You can't have an on switch without an off switch.
It's the same bloody switch, isn't it?
Exactly. It's just you can't live without it. So why do we polarize to say it shouldn't happen or it should happen, so it's meant to be or not meant to be? It's part of the whole thing. It's like
absolutely.
It's like we refer to something as a whole day, but the day is consistent of morning and night. It's just the degree to which is different, isn't it?
Yeah.
Same as temperature. We got hot and cold, but it's still temperature.
Yeah.
In the same way, it seems, and it seems that it's part of the whole thing. Construction, destruction is part of the play.
Absolutely. And they don't call it a cosmic play for no reason. In Sanskrit, there's with the Gita, there's a saying that Ram Ki Leela, that means the God's play or the cosmic play, right? Ram referring to God or the cosmos, and it just is that. And if we can start to see things in a different way, start to open our minds to the possibility that, you know what, this could potentially be a possibility, and I'm going to just go with this, and let's see what comes to me as a consequence. You might just start seeing the world in a different way. You might just start seeing things in a way in which you are more symbiotic. You're not separate from it, but you're more symbiotic. You're part of this, a cog in the machine, if you want to put it that way, if you want to use a mechanical mindset, or you're part of the weather, right? If you may, you're just in it, right? And you can't separate yourself from the weather. The weather is what it is, and you're in it. Therefore, you're part of the weather, and the weather's part of you. You cannot separate yourself from it, right? And if you start to just change that perception ever so slightly, just see how that thing just starts to unravel and unfold of its own accord, right? And yeah, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say that just something has popped into my way. You talk about perspective, yeah. So it's so funny. Like, check this out, right? So I bought one of those VR helmets, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I thought, okay, let's try this. Got the helmet, and it's like immersive experience, yeah. So you're in this, you're playing games, and obviously whatever's happening, you're reacting to it. It's just so funny, Lex. It's so funny. It's all happening up here.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't exist. Yeah? But yeah, you're there going, yeah, you're doing all of this kind of stuff, and you're getting happy and you're getting sad. And you stop for a moment and think, where did that come from? Where is that coming from? Right? It doesn't exist outside of this VR helmet. It exists in this thing we're looking at. All the feelings and emotions that are coming up are coming from within me, like whatever I'm projecting. So this thing about perspective is like, wow, like, does the thing really even exist in the way you think it does?
Exactly.
Right?
And if you was to kind of like really kind of narrow it down even further, you're wearing a projector that's projecting a scene, a scenario, a new reality into you, transducing that inside you, and you've got a choice. You've got a choice. Do you respond to that, or do you step back and say, "Hey, hold on a minute. Let me just watch this show. Let me just kind of make up my own mind." And, if you're really smart, you're like, hold on a minute. That's an artificial projection. That's not real. That's your VR. Yeah. Are you intelligent enough, right, to recognize you got a VR device on? And I'm using that metaphorically for the VR device on, right, all around us.
Bio machine or something, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we are in a visual reality, and we tend to project where we are onto everything else that's happening around us, but it's not necessarily what is happening around us. All right. So let me just give you an example. In my, I would say, earlier, more kind of fire from the hip kind of days, if I got an email which wasn't in alignment with what I wanted to achieve, I may have been a little bit aggressive. Okay. I won't even say assertive, because that's a kind way of saying, I was managing it carefully. It was aggressive. Yeah. Now when I read an email and it's not in alignment with what I want, I try and see like where are they coming from? If I was to put myself in their shoes, what are they experiencing? What are they going through in order to give me that information? And when I see it from their standpoint, I can appreciate more what's happening in their world rather than projecting my business onto their business and creating a false perception of what they're really trying to say.
Yeah.
And that's where communication starts to mismatch and you start to get conflicts.
That's a
And
wicked example, like, because it's like it goes on in the workplace, right? And it just reminded me of a scenario when I used to work in a company where we used to have almost like a central help desk where tickets from around the world used to come in, right? So we get things coming from Poland, from France, New Zealand, America, whatever, different places, tickets would come in. And I would, as the tickets come in, we would start to see how the staff were responding to these tickets in the team,
yeah,
right? And
yeah,
how they used to get frustrated with certain people, and how they used to then make this story up about why the way they're doing it, they don't get it or whatnot, anything like that. And it was interesting because I sat down one day and I thought, hang on a minute. So we've got a ticket coming in from someone like somewhere like Poland, right?
yeah,
Who may not necessarily, their English may not be their first language,
yeah,
right? So they're not going to speak in the same way. They're not going to write in the same way. They're most likely going to be quite straight with their wording and
yeah,
whatnot.
yeah, yeah,
So they're just trying to tell you what's happening on their side so you can fix it,
yeah.
right? And they're trying to explain it to you in the limited capacity of it,
Their
potentially in
vocabulary and
English because
language.
they might not know the language, right? And we're sitting on this side responding it to it with our own shit, as you said, reacting and behaving because we think they don't know what the hell they're talking about, kind of thing, right? And I wrote a whole piece on this for the team. And I said, look, this is what's going on. We this is a bit of training. This is what goes on. And after that point, they realized, they think, hang on a minute, what are they actually just saying? Let's look at this objectively as opposed
Yeah,
to putting our own stuff onto it.
yeah,
So that's a very key point because I think it's a good example of how it happens in the real life situation and how people can actually take that away and think, oh, am I doing that as well?
yeah. And in context of the koan crisis or crises, it's important to understand when someone's going through a crisis is is to have empathy,
Mm.
right? Is to meet them where they are, right? Is to put yourselves in their shoes for a moment, and that's where empathy is born. And a true understanding happens because you can't understand or have empathy for anyone if you're not going to really put yourself in their position, right? You'll never feel it. It'll always be superficial. You'll always feel detached. And guess what? They know it as well. That's even worse because if there's someone's really suffering with something and you really want to help or you really want to communicate with them, then you've got to meet them where they are. That doesn't mean you've got to go through all the trauma they're going through. It's just to understand them. You've got to momentarily just step into their shoes and see what they're seeing, feel what they're feeling, hear what they're hearing, you know, and and only then will you truly start to understand what's going on. So it's important. It's important, and this is, when everyone, if we've already started with everyone goes through suffering. That, in other words, everyone goes through a crisis. Then this is something we all need to work with. We all need to learn to cooperate. We all need to learn to compromise. We all need to learn to encapsulate what's happening in somebody's life by stepping into their shoes. And the thing is, the more you practice this, the better you get at just doing instantly. Okay. Right. It's just somebody's starting to say something and you're like, hold on, that's a bit odd. Let me jump into their shoes for a moment. You obviously don't tell them. And you jump into their shoes for a moment, just kind of like see, and see, feel, hear, taste, smell, get the whole sensory experience, even the thoughts that might be going through their heads, through their head, in order to kind of get a sense for where they are. And I promise you, and I don't make promises, but I promise you, right, because you will, when you start getting better at this, start to understand where people are at. Okay, this is a principle, right. Like I said, I don't make promises, but I made a promise. The reason I made a promise is because it's a principle. It's a universal principle. You cannot, right, not do that. You cannot not learn how to experience these things. If you do this, you will get that experience. You will connect with that person. Guess what? You'll make better relationships. You'll be able to help people even better, especially if you're on a, we're all healers. We're all healers. When we see somebody suffering, um, two things can happen, right? One, we think something's wrong with them and you fucking run, right? Two, you think, oh shit, they're going through something. You want to jump in and help them. You want to heal them, right? That's it. The reason why people run or say flight is because they're scared. They don't know how to deal with it. Why people go in to heal them is because they're fighters and they want to go in and help them, right? Come out of the fight. Okay. And then there'll be some people that just completely freeze. That same adrenaline response is happening because you don't know how to deal with the adversity. So don't let a fear of not knowing something cause you to respond unresourcefully to something. Go get the resources so you can help somebody, because you never know that you might be might need to help yourself. You might need to help your partner. You might need to help your children. You might need to help your parents. You might need to help a colleague. You might need to help a family member. You might need to help your friends, right? Because if everyone's suffering, it's going to happen. Sooner or later, you're going to experience somebody going through something, and we can all learn. We can all become the healers. We can all become, our own doctors, and doctors for other people in our own ways, and obviously I'm not talking about, general practitioners or surgeons and all this kind of stuff. I'm just saying healers that can help support and be there for people when they're going through a crisis. And if you don't know how to deal with it, then at least be there to refer them to somebody that can. Right, a professional that's qualified in that field of their suffering and their illness and injury or whatever it might be,
Exactly.
So sometimes it's okay to run, to do the flight. So if you feel like that's where you're comfortable at the moment, it's fine, right? But if you're a runner and you go through something, you can't keep running away from it because it'll keep happening. The crisis will keep repeating itself on you, okay? Right? And it will start off maybe small, and it'll get bigger until the crisis really becomes unmanageable. And you won't have an option but to deal with it, right? So I'd say nip it in the bud, get the insights early on as when things are gentle, right? Before those nudges become sucker punches, yeah? And transcend that learning. And then you stop that one, and then you can move on to whatever else life needs to teach you.
So talking about punches then, if we look at this from a kind of your martial perspective, right? Martial arts, your classes, whatnot, how you got insights into this particular thing, how would you link it back into the martial element of it? Like in martial arts, like where is this used on a regular basis, or where did you get your insight about this particular thing in that space?
Well, this insight came from the spiritual space, to be honest. It came through life experience, through my own process of suffering and crisis and criseing. So that's how I got the divine downloads on this, so to speak. And that's how the koans were born, or this koan was born. In a combative manner, how do you see that? Well, combat is exactly that. We are actually putting ourselves in a position of crisis, right? When you spar, man, that's a crisis waiting to happen. You get punched in the face, there's going to be a big crisis going on your nose or your chin or your eye or whatever, right? But your whole body's in crisis, right? You've got massive adrenaline dump going on, right? And you're trying to deal with this chaos, yeah? Your body goes into a crisis. It's a survival mode. And a survival mode is a crisis. If you need to survive, that's the biggest crisis that could happen, right? Right? Fundamentally, right? Your physical being is being threatened, yeah? So really, martial arts, just as a topic, is putting our whole being on the line in the face of crisis. Right. And we're saying, okay, I'm voluntarily doing this because I want to learn more about myself. Right. And through that crisis, you get punched in the nose or punched in the eye and get a black eye. Guess what? You're going to be freaking crying about that for a week or two, right? Until that goes through all different shades of black and purple and green and yellow before it eventually, right, restores back to its normal color, right? And if you're an idiot, if you're a fool, you won't see the lesson in it. But if you're intelligent, you'll thank the person that punching you in the eye first and foremost, because you didn't catch it or you didn't move out of the way. They taught you a lesson. And on top of that, what was that lesson? That's what you're trying to learn. But fundamentally underneath that, what you're really doing is you're trying to learn about yourself. You're truly trying to remain centered in a crisis situation, so that's one way of looking at it. And I can, there's a million and one different ways that you can look at applications, practical applications of combatives in a crisis or a crisis modality. But as a whole, I think the whole thing is serving this whole thing. Yeah.
That's brilliant, man. So there you go. Like, martial mind power is fantastic for dealing with crises, right? Because
but that's what it is, isn't it?
Exactly. When you put it that way, like that perspective on it, even to talk about it in that angle or different perspective, gives you a whole new view on, what we're sharing here. And that's what it's about. That's what the adaptability and stuff comes into it, right? So, Sifu Lak, you want to do the honors?
Do the honors. Oh, to read through it. But before I read through this, right, I'll give you one practical combative example, okay? And this is a story about one of my students who's now become a really near and dear friend, okay? And she, when it came to sparring, she would run. She was scared, okay? Scared of getting hit, scared of getting hurt. So I said to her, just stand there for a moment, right? Just stand there. Right? You're not allowed to do anything, right? And I'm going to punch you in the face, right? So I, got into stance, got ready, I let her kind of like, let all the anxiety build up in her. And then I punched and I missed her nose by, I would say, half a centimeter, right? Literally half a centimeter. And because I said
deliberately, just in case
because I told her not to move, right? I wanted her to experience all that buildup of that crisis happening inside her, all of that adrenaline, all of that fear, all of that anxiety, all of that nervousness, all of that negative emotion just welling up, right? I just made her feel it, and I forced her to stand there to just feel that sensation, right? And then I said, that's it. She was like, whew. She couldn't believe it. Because there was a huge recognition of what's going on inside her, right? And I didn't even hit her, right? And I said, that's all you need to know at this stage. Yeah. So I put her in crisis, but she could see through the lesson in that. So yeah, it's just, again, we can come up with so many different permutations, combinations of different kind of drills and so on in order to apply this. But that would be, missing the big point, the big picture. So
if anybody is interested, by the way, you can go to martialmindpower.com, check out the online dojo. And if you're in the vicinity, there's JKD London as well, where Lax is holding regular classes and teaching this stuff in person, so you can learn from the Sifu himself. So thank you for sharing on that practical approach, Lax.
Cheers, man. And you're welcome. So, all right, I'm going to read the koan out, okay, from this page 409 and 410. Okay, so crisis or crises. When you're faced with a crisis, the mind suffers and cries about it, gets clouded by it, gets stuck in a loop which prolongs the suffering. All crises you experience are serving you to reveal your true, authentic high self. continually nudging you towards your true, authentic, high self, helping you to evolve to the next level of your personal evolution towards your own original freedom, helping you to really see who you really are. It's okay to cry so you can process and integrate the lessons being served, so that you can start to see the lesson and start acting on that teaching so you can ascend. Failure to cry and see the lesson the crisis is serving you will just merely repeat the cycle of your crisis learnings. If you do not understand the crisis lesson the way life is serving it to you right now, then life will serve that lesson to you in a different way until you eventually get it. The person that gets into the crises mentality is the one who always seeks a lesson in a crisis, who conquers the fears and obstacles the crisis presents and is determined to evolve towards their original freedom and step into their true, authentic, high self and power. So there you go.
That's fantastic, Sifu Lak. I mean, yeah, I mean, there's so much insights and so much wisdom bombs in there. It gets you thinking on multiple levels, really. And for anyone who's interested, obviously the title of the book is The Art of Thinking Without Thinking. Humongous. There's tons and tons and tons of koans in this, and you can randomly read through any of them, or you could read one a day or whatever you want to do, and it will give you some sort of powerful insight as you go through it. Food for thought, as they say, right? And if you want to check that out, you can check it out on Amazon, but you can also go to martialmindpower.com and just follow the link to Amazon from there, or just buy it from the site. That's totally up to you. And as always, if there is anything that you found of interest or you want to find out more about, do definitely get in touch. Use the contact form on the website or leave a comment below in the comments box, and share the word, and get inspired to live with this martial mindset. So before we close, Lax, is there anything you want to say before we close off on today?
I just want to say, normally on podcasts, people say like and subscribe, right? Now, honestly, I couldn't care less if you like or subscribe, because, I'm not in it for public acknowledgement. Okay. But what I would say is, if you think this podcast would help somebody, then share it. Please share it and spread the wisdom. If you think it's wisdom, if you don't think it's wisdom, then don't share it. Okay. But if it's adding value to you and you think it will add value to somebody else and may leave a positive imprint in somebody's bodies, minds, and spirits, then please share it, because that's what it's all about. And honestly, when people forward things, it means that, you're thinking about somebody, because something's ignited a thought or a connection, soul's connection between you and that person, and there's a way that you can help them. And you don't always have to be the one that's doing the actual work to help them. Sometimes the work is just sending them the information that they might be needing, and it could be one little thing that somebody says, or one little wisdom bomb that we've dropped in this podcast that could change somebody's life. And if that happens, then this podcast is doing its job. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I'll leave that with you guys, at your own discretion. And this wisdom, if you're learning something from this, take it, own it, use it. Okay. This isn't something that's owned by any one person. Just because it's coming from me doesn't mean it's me. It's all of us. This is for everybody. So it's universal, it's cosmic. Spread it. All we're really doing is waking people up to what's already sleeping inside them. All right. So if something's woke up in you, help wake up somebody else, man. There's no point, you being awake and everybody else sleep, right? How are you going to party? All right. So on that note, guys, enjoy, and I hope you enjoyed this podcast.
Yeah. Thank you, Lax, and thank you everyone else, and we see you soon.